That dawn in a small town in Argentina is still a hotly debated tragedy. No one heard any shots, no screams, no footsteps of a running man. Only a motionless body next to a motorcycle, blood on the pavement, and a young man whose death will shock not only their small town, but the entire country. His name was Fernando Pastoriz, a young man who should not have died that dawn. He was found in a very serious condition, and without saying anything, he died lying on the cold asphalt without waiting for an ambulance. The woman who rode away with him on a motorcycle that night would post a photo of them together on Instagram a couple of hours later with the caption, "5 years together, I love you forever, my angel." Calmly, as if nothing had happened. It was love, or revenge, or something that has no name. But one thing was clear from the start: this reaction was not accidental. Her name was Nahir Galarza, and until the dawn of December 29th, her life seemed perfect to outsiders. She was born in a provincial town with quiet streets and colorful carnivals, to a police officer and a woman who strictly maintained order. An ordinary childhood, a younger brother with a disability, daily cleaning, perfect grades, and a dream of becoming a lawyer. Everything seemed to go according to her plan and formed a perfect picture of a girl from a good family. She grew up ambitious, neat, with a mania for cleanliness and increasingly sharp character traits. She studied brilliantly at school, especially in foreign languages, played sports, looked after her appearance, never missed a massage, and spent hours in the gym. It seemed that everything was going according to plan. She met him early, when she was 14 and he was 15. His name was Fernando Pastoriza, and he lived a few blocks away. At first glance, he was a cheerful, charming guy who loved animals and motorcycles. They started dating almost immediately, but something was wrong in their relationship from the very beginning. No stability, no trust, only jealousy, sharp quarrels, stormy reconciliations, and everything. In a circle. Sometimes they would separate for a month, then return to each other again, as if they could not break free from this strange dependence. Some called it passion, others teenage love with a touch of jealousy and excessive emotionality. But for the two of them, it was a life in which there was no middle ground, only extremes. With each passing year, Nahir and Fernando's relationship became more strained. Outwardly, they still looked like an ordinary young couple, walking around the city, taking photos from parties, smiling in front of strangers. But inside, something was accumulating that could no longer be controlled. Nahir increasingly fell into fits of rage, monitored Fernando's messages, staged jealous scenes in public, and then disappeared for several days, refusing to pick up the phone. He grew tired, remained silent, but returned as if he himself could not break this connection, even when he knew how destructive it was becoming. In the summer of 2016, their families went to Brazil together. It was a strange vacation, an attempt to get closer, to pretend that everything was fine. No one knew then that a year later, Fernando would be dead, and the photos from that trip would become evidence. Nahir's parents insisted they barely knew the boy, but the photos said otherwise. Family photos, smiles, dinners together. The lie was quickly exposed, and this was only the beginning. In the fall, the tension between the couple only increased. They met secretly without their parents' consent, fought and made up with such speed as if their lives depended on this pain. Nahir's friends claimed that she suffered from humiliation. Fernando's friends said the opposite. He was afraid of her, endured threats, complained about beatings, but for some reason still did not leave. These confessions will appear later, after death, but at that time everything continued as always. Passion, scandals, reconciliations. On Christmas Eve 2017, they had another row. It was one of those conflicts that leave a mark. A few days later, she would call him herself and arrange a meeting that would be their last. On December 28, 2017, everything seemed normal. During the day, Nahir went for a massage, as she did regularly, and in the evening, she discovered that her phone was dead and the charger was left with Fernando. This became a reason to come to him again. She came, took the thing, but did not leave immediately. She stayed. The words spoken that night remained between them, but the course of events after is documented and irreversible. Around 2 a.m., Fernando climbed onto his motorcycle, with Nahir behind him. CCTV would capture them together as they left the block. Then silence. Already at dawn, around 5 in the morning, A passing taxi driver would see a motionless body on a deserted road, a motorcycle turned on its side, and traces of blood leading away. Fernando was still alive, but too weak to speak. A few minutes later, he would die from 2 gunshot wounds, one in the back, one in the chest. His pockets were untouched. His money and documents were still there. It was not a robbery. They will find 2 helmets nearby. This means that there were 2 of them. Cameras nearby will record a female figure walking, calmly, without panic, not running away, not stumbling. Her face is hidden, but her gait is recognizable. She will return home alone, take a shower, change clothes, and at 7 in the morning, she will post a photo of them together on Instagram, with a caption about love, about 5 years, about farewell. Calm, calculating, as if she was summing up. But to what, love or murder, no one knew yet. His mother, upon learning of her son's death, was the first to call her. The answer was restrained. Nahir said she knew nothing, and that should have been the end of it. But not in this case. Nahir greeted the morning as if nothing had happened. The post with the declaration of love was already collecting hundreds of comments, and she herself continued to feign grief. Quiet, detached, as if the whole tragedy had happened somewhere nearby, but not to her. Fernando's parents were shocked, but they were not quick to doubt. Nahir's mother, Yamina, stayed close to her daughter, hugging her, comforting her, talking about the unbearable shock. To her mother, everything looked as it should have in such a situation. Nahir was soon called to the police station. It was a formal interrogation, standard procedure. Friends, relatives, the last people who saw the deceased. She said that Fernando had driven her home at night and that they had not spoken since then. She took a shower, went to bed, and learned the news in the morning. She told the story with tears in her eyes, but she kept her composure. The police officers, not yet knowing what would happen next, believed her. For now. Then they called her father, Marcelo Galarza, a police officer who, as it would soon turn out, had lost his service weapon shortly before the incident. When asked about his acquaintance with Fernando, he replied that he had never heard of him, right in the eyes of his colleagues. Despite his attempt to appear convincing, they already knew that this was a complete lie, because the investigation already had photographs of him, his wife, daughter, and the murdered man smiling together in Brazil a year before the murder. Something didn't add up. It was at this point that investigators began to look at the case differently. Nahir was no longer just a grieving girl who had lost her lover. She had lied. Her father had hidden. The gun had disappeared. A version emerged that at first they were afraid to voice out loud. The murder could have been connected with something more than a quarrel, and perhaps everything was planned in advance. And if this is true, then Nahir was not the only suspect. When ballistics confirmed that Fernando had been shot with a 9mm police-issue pistol, investigators immediately requested a test of the officer's service weapons, and then everything fell into place. Father's gun, Nahir, is the same. Not just the same type, but exactly the same. All the parameters of the weapon matched: the number, the structure, the fingerprints. Only the father claimed that the weapon never left the house, which means someone took it secretly and returned it. Nahir was called in for questioning again. This time she didn't cry, and she didn't lie. She simply said, "Yes, I did the shooting. Yes, it was my father's gun. Yes, I put it back." She said it calmly, in an even voice, as if she were talking about something far away that no longer concerned her. The investigators were stunned, not so much by the confession, but by its form. It was as if she had prepared in advance, rehearsed this scene inside herself. She added that she did it in self-defense. According to her, Fernando allegedly started beating her that night, pulled her hair, pushed her. She got scared, took the gun, shot. Then again, she ran away in panic, not knowing that he was dead. She came home, took a shower, cleaned up the evidence, never called the police, never tried to save him, because as she would later say, the wounded don't always die. This phrase will be a turning point, as will the surveillance video, which shows her calmly walking home after the shooting, without shaking, without tears, without looking back. The investigation will record. It was not panic, it was pure cold-bloodedness. And her story is an attempt to create an excuse that does not stand up to logic or evidence. Now it was not just about murder, it was about premeditation, and the image of Nahir began to crumble. Nahir's excuse quickly crumbled. Ballistics tests concluded that the first shot was accidental, but the second was not. The second shot was fired into the chest from close range after Fernando had already fallen. It was the finishing shot, targeted, intentional. The expert had no doubts. There was no chance of an accident here. Nahir tried to mislead investigators by saying that the gun had fallen out of Fernando's clothes, that they had both fallen off the motorcycle, and that the gun had fired on its own. Then she picked it up, and it fired again. But the marks on the asphalt, the location of the body, the nature of the wounds, and even the angle of the bullet's entry refuted each of these versions. And most importantly, the camera again. It filmed Nahir walking down the street 20 minutes after the shots were fired, confidently at a steady pace with no signs of shock. No blood, no torn clothes, no disorientation. The girl who had just committed murder was returning home with precision down to the last step. Her subsequent actions were confirmed and corresponded to her words because at home she took a shower, changed clothes, returned the gun to its place on the refrigerator where it was kept. His parents didn't notice he was missing. And then Instagram. Photos, captions, likes, comments. While Fernando lay on the pavement, while his mother called an ambulance, while the city woke up in horror, she created a post. And each of these actions became evidence, both legal and moral, which shocked everyone. A psychological examination was soon ordered. It showed a portrait that left no doubt. Aggressiveness, manipulativeness, egocentrism, impulsive lying, a need for dominance. All this is not in words, but confirmed by handwriting, letters, behavior. And then a new question arose. Was this murder just a flash in the pan? Or was it all planned in advance with cold calculation? The trial began in the summer of 2018, and from the first day it became a sensational event for the entire country. In the dock sat a 19-year-old student with a cold gaze, an upright posture, and a manner of speaking in which there was neither confusion nor remorse. Her behavior evoked contradictory emotions. She appeared in the hall in provocative clothes, sometimes smiled, answered harshly and with irony, as if she did not take what was happening seriously. One of the psychologists would later say, there was something demonstrative, almost theatrical in this, and the defense tried to return the case to the field of self-defense. They showed correspondence, hinted at the toxicity of the relationship, brought in friends who were ready to testify that Fernando was allegedly hot-tempered and prone to pressure. But the prosecutors presented documents, expert examinations, and facts for each argument. The main conclusion of the ballistics experts left no doubt. 2 shots from different distances in the back and chest ruled out impulsiveness. The first was unexpected. The second was the finishing blow. It is not surprising that her behavior after the murder attracted special attention. The judges noted that there was no fear or panic in Nahir's actions. She did not call emergency services, did not ask for help, did not tell anyone what happened. All her subsequent actions, as you remember, were cold and calculating. This moment became one of the most discussed. Even those who tried to understand her could not explain how she could behave so calmly after the tragedy if it really was an accident. The judges unanimously found her guilty. No mitigating circumstances, no doubt. It was murder, premeditated, personal, deliberate, and Nahir Galarza became the youngest woman in the country's history to receive a life sentence. The 3rd day of July, 2018, became a date that divided the lives of 2 families. One in tears, but with a sense that justice had been done. The other, with faces frozen with tension, not ready to accept what would now forever be associated with a crime. Nahir Galarza received a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 35 years. She was 19. She became a symbol for some of horrific cruelty under the guise of innocence. For others, of a failed destiny, destroyed by an irreversible mistake. While the Pastorizo family was collecting photographs of Fernando and organizing a memorial service on what would have been his 21st birthday, Nahir's lawyers were already preparing an appeal. The lawyers changed, new arguments were added, including an emphasis on the girl's emotional state, pressure from her family, and allegedly unaccounted factors that influenced her actions. But the appeal was rejected, as was the next one. All the defense's arguments were again and again shattered by the facts. The camera, ballistics, behavior, confession. The media did not stop. Some published interviews with Nahir's friends, who said they knew her from a different side, as vulnerable, kind, forever in love. Others, with Fernando's friends, who did not hide their anger. He complained to them, he asked for help, he did not know how to get out of this relationship. The city was divided. Some whispered that Nahir had simply become a hostage to pressure and family instability. But most could not understand the main thing. How can you shoot a man, leave quietly, hide everything, and the next morning publish a photo full of love? Meanwhile, Nahir had been transferred to the women's prison in Paraná province. It was her new place. 9 prisoners, 1 routine, and years of silence, with a chance to appeal still ahead. But outside her cell, that chance no longer meant what it once did. Years passed, but the Nahir Galarza case did not disappear from the headlines. Every statement, every change in behavior, every new version became the reason for a new wave of controversy. In 2022, she surprised again, this time by accusing her own father. According to her, all the confessions were lies. She allegedly covered for him because she was afraid, because she was raised in an atmosphere of fear, because she felt pressure and threat since childhood. At this point, Nahir's mother finally took her side. She supported the statement, filed a complaint in court, and spoke harshly about her ex-husband. New materials were requested, a new trial was initiated, a new investigation began, this time not for the sake of acquittal, but for the sake of doubt. But the court remained unmoved. The cameras did not record the father that night. There were no witnesses. Not a single physical evidence pointed to another perpetrator. Everything. Only to Nahir. The defense's appeals were rejected, time after time. The Supreme Court, the provincial attorney's office, the appellate courts. Everything that could be used was used. But the decision remained the same. The murder was hers. Everything that happened after that only reinforced the feeling that the truth didn't need new stories. It had already been told that night, without words, with a shot. Outside the court, people continued to argue. Some about justice, others about the line between guilt and despair. But none of them could change the most important thing. Fernando would not grow older. His life stopped at 20, and hers will last for decades in concrete walls and reflections that are impossible to hide from. Because there are sentences that are pronounced without words and never end. The story of Nahir Galarza has long ceased to be just a crime case. It has become a mirror for society, for families, for everyone who saw salvation in love and found destruction in it. Her name still sounds in reports, in disputes, in documentaries. But outside the cameras, years of silence, routine, cold and loneliness, in which there are no more likes, stories, or defenders. Fernando will always be who he was at 20, alive, smiling, with dreams that no one managed to destroy, except for the one he let too close. And Nahir, the one who perhaps did not want to be a monster, but became one in the eyes of an entire country. Because sometimes it is not the action, but what happens after it that says more than any words.